course, like building from start to finish and throwing content in there.
Hi, Facebook. Hush, I'm on live now. Hi, Facebook. I'm not crazy. I am talking to Scott Doucet on Zoom right now. We are recording an episode of Podcast Bay, The Key, my segment, where we talk about mindset and, all good kind of stuff like tech systems. And I wanted to jump on live so you can hear us recording this session as we talk about why people don't launch their podcasts. And so you'll hear from my version. Scott's going to talk through. Hopefully you can hear him. I'm pretty sure you can. If not, just let me know. But so you'll hear the troubles and issues I had about launching my podcast. All right. So let's go, Scott.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of Podcast Bay. This is Scott Doucet, and I am here with the veteran woman, and I call her my tech angel because this woman has rescued me from so many tech issues over the last little while. I can't even explain it. She is my accountability bulldog. She is basically the person who, helps me with my mindset and keeps me going in the right direction, tells me when I'm up past my bedtime, that kind of thing. And what I have welcomed Ariel on the show to do is a segment called The Key, where we talk mindset and we talk about things that podcasters have to overcome. And so one of the things that Ariel and I have talked about is her podcast, time and time again, because she was kind of funny about it in the beginning. But before we get into that, I'm going to welcome her onto the show. Ariel, how are you doing?
I am great. Thank you so much, Scott, for having me on.
Yeah, and I understand that you're recording this live for your Facebook.
We are on Facebook Live, and I hope that they can hear you as well, because this is something very important. And I know that you help people launch podcasts. You help me launch mine. And so that's why I wanted to go on Facebook Live as well, so they can hear, from somebody who's lived through it and lived through that fear of launching, how things go.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I've seen that fear a couple of times, and it's brought on by different reasons, and so I'd be curious to ask what yours is. But before we get into that, I just want to bring up that, podcasting is different for everybody. Everybody gets into it for different reasons. There's a lot of issues that come up when you start to create content, Part of that issue is fear. There's these things like, am I good enough? Will people actually want to hear my message? Some people get caught up in the tech, I don't understand audio. What kind of gear do I have to buy? And they get stuck in forums and they overanalyze everything. Other people are worried about their content. There's a lot of shit that goes on in your mind when you're trying to launch a show for the world. And so,
yes.
It really does baffle you. And I mean, if you're adding a business to that, mindset becomes a very big deal very quickly.
Yes, definitely. Oh my goodness.
And so I'm curious to know, Ariel, why didn't you launch your show? Because you recorded multiple episodes and then just sat on them for a while, which, I'm going to call it mother henning. you mother henned your episodes.
I really
I've
did.
Heard of a lot of people doing that, and just recently it's becoming a more common theme where I think the last two guests I've had on the show have had recordings that they didn't launch.
I mean, for me, I did some of the things that you mentioned. I was worried about the tech, and actually when I first started recording, I had some technical issues. And I had a coach at the time, and he had, referred me to some people, connected me with some people in order to have interviews to start my podcast. And I was supposed to start in August of 2016. And so I started recording my first episodes around June or July of 2016. And I sat on them, and I sat on them, and I sat on them. And I didn't launch until February of 2017. And I mean, things all happen for a reason, definitely. I I worried about being perfect. I worried about content. It was my very first show. I didn't really listen to podcasts. I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, just I had every excuse in the world. And I
Can I ask you a question real quick?
go ahead.
What's your approach to it now?
What part?
When you were like worried about this, worried about that, I bet you now you're like, it'll go out how it goes out. If people like it, they like it.
Yep. And plus I have an amazing producer, so that helps.
It helps. He seems like a dashing, charming gentleman.
So, I mean, I overthought so much, and I wasn't sure how I wanted to word, what the podcast was about. And somebody asked me what the podcast is about, and I'm like, you know what, just be a guest, and I will structure it so that it makes sense for my podcast. Because I really like to talk about the things that people usually don't talk about. They sweep under the rug and taboo topics. And so pretty much even though it's called the Veteran Woman Podcast, anybody can be on the podcast, because it's sharing your story and talking about turning breakdowns into breakthroughs. That's the big thing with my podcast. And I guess finally, we had talked. I remember you asking me about virtual assistant, hiring a virtual assistant. I remember initially thinking, oh my goodness, a podcast producer is going to cost a fortune. And I was trying to piece things together. That's a whole other thing. I was trying to piece things together. So piece together my intro, the production. And then I talked to you about virtual assistants. I asked you about your business because I had been following you on Facebook. And then you told me how much it would be, and that you would do everything, like show notes, even though you're not doing show notes anymore. Show notes and the intuitive production is what really got me. Because I didn't have to go in, listen to my own episode, and tell you what to take out. You just take it, listen, and based on my personality, which you know very well, you would edit things out or leave things in. And so that also released my need to be a perfectionist. And so I literally just get on and have a conversation. And for me, really, you don't even have to do that much editing. I don't know what it looks like on your side, but for me, I'm like, you know what? This is a conversation. So it's like people are listening in on our phone conversation. That's it. And once I start getting into that, because at first I would have this set of questions that I would ask, and that got boring real quick. And I didn't want to do it anymore. And then I said, you know what? I'm scrapping the questions. I still have them there, but I'm scrapping the questions and I'm just going to talk to this person. And that has been so rewarding. And then, so finally I launched in February 2017. And ever since then, I've been like, oh my goodness, why didn't I launch sooner? Why did I not do this sooner? Because I absolutely love it. Absolutely.
You launched exactly when you were supposed to, and you got everything done the way you were supposed to, because that's one of the things about your story that I like, and a lot of other people's stories, is once they've launched their show, it means they've gone and figured out and overcome everything that everyone else has faced up against. Mm-hmm. So you had perfection worries, you had technical worries, you had some gear worries, there were things that you needed to know, and you found the people who would help you with them, or you found the answers yourself, the stuff you felt like doing and wanted to do, and implemented that. Yes. And I mean, that's part of why my service exists. And it was fun to get in a conversation thinking I was getting VA help, and then landing a client, just because that's when I knew, honestly, the exact moment I knew that my product and my service was a good one. Mm-hmm. Was when I called to get pitched to. Yeah. And walked away with a new client because it was something that was needed that badly. And now you're my support system. You're one of my best friends. Love you to death, and business partner. So I mean, some of my stuff, So it definitely grew into one of those types of relationships. And the funny part was, all of the things that you've accomplished, you know, there's speaking gigs you've accomplished, there's relationships you've forged, there's, you know, not-for-profits that you've been asked to be a part of, there's all kinds of associations and things you've got to highlight and shout out to. And that's all of a result of getting over those initial fears and launching your show.
Mm-hmm. And I've been blessed to meet so many amazing people through the podcast, because I've had people sign up and I not know who they are. And then by the time we finish a conversation, we're collaborating in some way. So, and my whole thing when I started the podcast, I said, I did a telesummit and I loved interviewing people. And I hate saying interview. I use that word lightly because it's more having a conversation, just, you know, talking to people and learning their story. And then I said, you know what? I want to have a podcast. Didn't know a thing about podcasting, didn't know what to do, what to get, who to talk to, whatever. And then I started looking, I started learning about podcasting, you know, the whole Google thing and taking classes and buying equipment and everything. And I even looked into like, okay, well, how to monetize my podcast and, you know, how many downloads do I want? And then I remember talking to you and you couldn't tell me how many downloads I should shoot for. So I was just like, you know what, forget it. I don't care if no one listens to my podcast. At least I know the person who I'm interviewing had a chance to share their story and I had a chance to connect with someone. And so I don't even worry about the downloads. Do I look at it? Yes. And I get excited because I'm like, oh, yes, I had 10 downloads today. But what really matters to me is when I have people tell me they've heard about the Veteran Woman because of the podcast, they've listened to an episode, or how the episodes have impacted their lives. That is what means the most to me. And when I decided to launch season 2, like, I'm not giving up podcasting. When I decided to launch season 2, that's what I kept in my mind. Like, how can I serve those people who are listening even more? I'm not worried about 5,000 downloads or 6,000 downloads. It's how can I make that impact to the people who really need to hear the podcast? And I know that may scare some people. They may think, well, it's all about the downloads. No, it's about the connections. Because let me tell you something. So when I started researching podcasting, I found John Lee Dumas, and I was, you know, following him because, I mean, you Google podcasting, and back then, because now of course Podcast Bay is going to come up, but back then you Google podcasting and JLD came up. So, you know, study. And then I found out that he's a veteran. And for the longest, I had it on my vision board. You know, I want to interview JLD. And then I thought to myself, but I don't have sponsors. I don't have this many downloads. I don't have this many listeners. Blah, 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 blah. I got to send out a certain kind of email. So I was Googling and looking up, you know, email formats for inviting big influencers on your show. And then finally I said, you know what? Let me stop thinking so freaking hard. Breathe, just be me, and just ask. And I sent him a Facebook message and I said, hey, this is why I want you on a show. How does this sound? And he said, great. Send me an email. And then he sent me a calendar link. And then I'm like all excited. I just like, oh my gosh, I got him on the show. And I wasn't supposed to tell that right now. Because I haven't launched yet. That was my big launch secret. But it was just amazing. So it doesn't matter what your downloads are. Know what your show is about and reach out to the people who will help impact and influence your audience in the way that it is aligned with your show.
Well, that's just it. And I mean, I can monetize my show easier than people with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of downloads in a lot of cases, because I have my finger on the pulse of exactly who my audience is. Mm-hmm. I know what they do, what they use for gear, what they use for hosting, who they trust with their web development. Like, I hang out with them every day in Podcast Bay community, right? So, like, with my audience, I know enough that I know what kind of guests they want to hear. I know, and it helps so much to bridge that gap and not worry about like, well, you got caught into analysis paralysis. You started overthinking, and then you started analyzing how you're going to approach things, when you're going to ask, what email template format thing are you going to use, like all that stuff. And then finally we're just like, yeah, I'm just going to do it. And sure enough, he got on. And a lot of the times it's that, yeah, I'm just going to do it part. That's the only part you need to do.
Yeah. Because, I mean, like you said, with analysis paralysis, it's like you're taking course after course because you're like, oh, I didn't learn enough yet. Oh, I need to look at this. I need to research this. I need to buy this, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, just do it already. Oh my gosh, just do it. And then learn. I mean, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail. And I put that in quotation marks. It's okay. When you fail fast. I was speaking with someone the other day, fail fast. And because the faster you fail, the faster you get to success. And it's not always a failure. I mean, just do it. Because as the longer we sit on things, time is passing us by, and we may never launch or never get our message out to the world. And there's people out there who need to hear that message. So just do it, and then make adjustments along the way. I've been blessed to have you as also not just a producer, but as a coach. So hearing your feedback and some of the things that I was so worried about, you would compliment me on. And I'm like, really? Seriously? And then, oh my goodness. Then I really had like a boost of confidence, and I was like, I'm doing it this way. And in that, I became more authentic. I was like, I'm going to do it my way. People going to listen to it? Maybe people are not, but I'm going to do it my way because I know this message needs to get out. The message inside of me and the message that my guests have, I know it needs to get out. And even if it's just one person listening and they're impacted by it, that's what matters. So definitely know the why of your show. For those who are podcasting or radio or whatever, know your why. Why are you doing that show? What message are you trying to get across? And if only just one person is listening, how do you want that to affect and impact them and inspire them?
Beautiful, beautiful. So, no matter what your reason for not launching your podcast is yet, do I really want a show? And if the answer is yes, what can I do, or who can I contact, or where can I go to get the answers, implement what I learned, and get my show off the ground? Because a lot of the things that Ariel is experiencing, a lot of the things that I've experienced have been successes from running our podcasts.
Oh, yes.
So if you're being held back by fear, you're missing out on a lot of opportunities to grow your brand, to grow your confidence, to grow your experience, and grow relationships. And so you should examine just how bad do you want to do the show, what is holding you back, and how can you fix it? Mm-hmm.
And you have a community to reach out to. So for those who are listening, who are on Facebook Live with me, I mean, find Podcast Bay, the community, visit podcastbay.net. And that's where we have me, Scott, Cole Johnson, Kwame Corbett, and it's like a wealth of talent coming together from different backgrounds. We all love our podcast. We love to podcast. You have coaching, but you have everything right there in that community, even in the free Facebook community, to help you launch your podcast and work over those hurdles. Because that's one of the things I talk about is mindset within the Podcast Bay community. And it's like, well, why does this matter? Because you're going to have those hurdles. Anybody in business or anything, you're going to have those mindset hangups when it comes to money, monetizing your podcast. What if people don't listen? What if I mess up? Just all of this stuff. And we talk about all of that in the Podcast Bay community.
Beautiful. And so for those of you listening to Podcast Bay, thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, drop by, let us know in the community. If you didn't like what you heard, let us know that too. We're always happy to accept love and hate. We understand they go together. So if you are recording this week, you know what to do. Make it a great one. Ariel, so much Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Scott. So what do you think, people? If you are out there and you are wanting to know more about podcasting, you're wanting to launch a podcast, join me in the Podcast Bay community on Facebook. And then we can talk to you about podcastbay.net, the actual Captain's Quarters membership community, which is amazing. I mean, a wealth of knowledge in there. I am so excited and so blessed to be a part of this team. And I mean, Scott has just been amazing for me. Amazing, amazing. The feedback and the coaching when it comes to podcasting and just overcoming some of the hangups that I've had. And I definitely want to pass it on to everyone. And we have some amazing producers. Scott is a producer. Cole is a producer. And then Kwame, he just knows everything. He has his own podcast or media network. So I'm telling you, that is the place to be. Podcastbay.net. Look up Podcast Bay, the community, our Facebook group, and join. It's free to join, and come ask your questions about all things podcasting. So we have one more episode to record, so I will let you all go, and make sure to listen to Podcast Bay for more info. That's the Podcast Bay, and you can hear my segments of the key. I am signing off. I am Coach Ariel, certified life and veteran development coach and founder of the Veteran Woman Movement. I love each and every one of you. Talk to you soon.